Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. Well, the last time we saw this Troike 12-inch rotary table, it was in pieces, needed to be cleaned, and I was trying to decide if I was going to leave it with its patina or if I was going to paint it. Well, if you guessed paint it, you were on the winning team. After giving it a bath, it was obvious that the paint was almost non existent. There was very little of it left. And I think some of the paint actually came off as a result of the solvent I use, unfortunately. So a little bit of Rust-Oleum, I think, gives it a little bit of a new life. I also spent the time to clean up all the hardware, and some of this even found its way over to the wire wheel and the buffer. The table itself was mostly in solid shape except for the top. There's definitely signs of rust pitting. This is likely from using water-based coolant and not cleaning it up, but we'll address that before this video ends. Unlike my small 8-inch rotary table, this one does not appear to sit in an oil bath since the side of it where the worm drive goes in is open. So I'm assuming it's a combination of grease and oil. So I've got some, which is essentially white lithium grease here that I've used in motor bearings and other machines, and will give the gear here itself a nice liberal coating of grease. And while I have this upside down, I might as well put a little bit of oil on the underside of the table. And with a little oil here on the top of the base, I'll flip it upside down and set it on the table. With everything still upside down, I can insert this tapered split bushing here after putting a little bit of oil on the inside and the outside. And the bushing gets locked in place with this screw. Well, I want to adjust this bushing so that it is tight enough to where the table will still rotate freely, but not so tight that it ends up clamping it. And you use the screw here to adjust that. The tighter you screw it in, the tighter that bushing will get on the spindle of the table. Well, next I want to install this lock ring. Well, and rather than using the two punches I did during disassembly, I cut a couple of pieces of round bar scrap that'll fit in there, and now I can just use like a wrench or a screwdriver to spin this lock ring down until it's appropriately tight. Now I don't want this thing so tight that the table doesn't rotate, so it's kind of a fine balance here. Lesson learned here, I should have marked this ring, maybe with a couple of punch marks or a scribe, so I could have put it back on exactly in the same orientation as it was when it came off. Well, now that I'm comfortable with how tight that is, or loose, depending on your perspective, I can tighten these set screws, which um, fit up against. There's a couple of brass pieces down at the bottom of these bores that then press against the threads, and that keeps the ring from moving. With it flipped back over now, I can see that the table does feel pretty good. There's no, you know, noticeable slop in it, and it rotates nice and smooth. Well, next I'm going to reinstall this adapter for the power feed onto this. I don't know what you call this part that the worm drive goes into, but there's these four socket head cap screws that connect them together. Well, and here's where I realized I got a little bit ahead of myself because with this adapter mounted, the shaft doesn't go in far enough because the shaft has to go in first. So I need to take this back apart again. Okay, with this now back apart, I can insert the shaft into this piece. I'm not sure what this is called. And then slide on the worm and attach it with the taper pin. I'm also going to go ahead and install the set screws that are used to adjust the backlash. And now I can go ahead and insert this into the power feed adapter. So I'm ready now. I can reinsert this whole mechanism into the main body of the rotary table. With everything lined back up, I can use the same tool that I used during disassembly to remove this screw to go ahead and reinsert it. And of course, as luck would have it, when I was finished putting this whole thing back together and testing it, I realized I had a couple of parts left over, which, happens. And they were the shims that go underneath this piece before the screw goes in. So off camera, I ended up taking this back apart once again and inserting those shims. I'm putting the handle on here just temporarily so I can use it to adjust, at least get close, adjust the backlash of the worm before tightening this screw down completely. I'll take care of a couple of small minor things here. This is an indicator for the degree marker, and we'll also install the table lock. I had intended to maybe replace the handle on this thing, but for now I opted just to leave it as it is. Maybe I'll replace it. I'm not sure. And back to this power feed adapter. The next piece that goes in here is this bearing, and it was a really nice tight fit, which is what you'd want. So I tried to use a brass drift to drive this home, but it was still getting a little off kilter and was just making it more trouble than it was worth. So I found a piece of pipe in the scrap pile here that seemed to be the right fit that did the job much better. Next to go on is this spacer, and again it's a pretty tight fit over the shaft. So I found another piece of pipe in my scrap bin that I was able to use to drive it home. Now I believe this last spacer that's going in here essentially gets this adapter to be the same physical configuration as to what a Bridgeport table would be. So now I can slide on the spacer for the power feed, and this is what would have come with the servo anyway, and now everything kind of lines up once the power feed is attached. And the rest here is no different than any other power feed installation you would for Bridgeport. There were two different woodruff keys that I had removed. One of them, this one here, had one of its ears kind of chopped off, and I couldn't remember which one went where, so I just guessed and put this one in the back slot, which probably turned out to be a bad choice. I should have gone back and looked at the video, because once I got this together, realized that this was the wrong one, and I had to take it all back apart again. Well, and here's that woodruff key that should have gone in the first slot, which is not going to fit into this one because of the brass part of the servo. It doesn't have a corresponding key in it. So all this has to come back off. I won't bore you with that. I'll do that off camera. Well, and here's the correct key in the slot. Yeah, I could have just trimmed the other woodruff key, but I guess I would have rather had a full key in the back than two half keys. Now with that key in, the handle can slide on. The last thing to go on here is this lock nut, which I'll tighten up with a 3/4 inch socket. Well, and that's everything back together. The table seems to operate smoothly, and if I plug the power feed in, it seems to operate as well in both directions. Now what I need to do is address the condition of the table. Well, with some help, I got this thing mounted over here on the Bridgeport table, and I must say a 12-inch rotary table doesn't look too bad here on the Bridgeport. It seems to be a decent size. It's just too big for me to move around in my shop. Well, regardless, I need to do something with this table and at least give it a little better appearance, if not make it more usable. So I have a 3-inch indexable face mill that I picked up from CME Tools recently, and I've got some inserts in it that are generally used for aluminum, but I find that using an aluminum insert on cast iron produces a really nice finish. So I'm going to raise the knee here up until it touches, and then raise the knee up again another 0.003 of an inch. And since this does have a power feed on the table, we'll just go ahead and engage the power feed and take a skim cut around it 360 degrees. Well, now that thing has gone 360 degrees, I'm going to engage the power feed on the table, on the X table that is, for the Bridgeport, and move the table over so the cutter can, the face mill can go ahead and finish off the inside of the table. Now, this hopefully will produce a finish that doesn't show, many interruptions. Well, I'm going to raise the knee up another 0.005 of an inch, and this time instead of starting it over top of the table, I'm going to use the X-axis power feed here to slowly feed the face mill into the rotary table. Again, I'm kind of hoping for that nice smooth transition so we don't see any, peculiar machining marks. Even though you probably wouldn't be able to feel them, I'm hoping to avoid any kind of funny appearances. What I'm trying to do here, though, is to remove really any of the pitting and some of the more obvious apprentice marks. There's some deeper marks here that I'm not likely going to be able to do anything about, and I don't want to take off that much material anyway. I want to keep as much mass in this table as I can. Well, there's still some marks in this that didn't completely clean up, so I think I'm going to go ahead and take one more 0.005 cut, and that'll put us around 14 thousandths that I'm taking off of the surface of the table, which I think is very minimal. I could have gone a lot deeper to, clean up that mill mark that's got to be 100 thousandths deep. But since I don't plan on keeping this thing, I'll leave that up to the next steward of this piece of tooling to decide whether or not that's something that they can live with or not. Well, there are some machining swirls that you can see, but you cannot feel. This thing is as smooth as glass. I couldn't be happier with the finish. I wish it looked a little nicer, but it feels great. Well, that's going to be it for this restoration and for this video. By the time that this gets published, this will already be on Marketplace, and who knows, it might already be off to a new owner. Unfortunately, it's just a little bit too big for me to keep. Well, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And a big thank you to all those that are helping support the channel financially through Patreon or PayPal. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.